Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Craig, and I will be your tour guide. We're gonna be looking at Anacostia today. If anybody's not familiar with where Anacostia is, if you look at a map of DC, there are two rivers that cradle it like a diamond. I call it a diamond in the rough. To the west is Potomac River, and to the east is Anacostia River. Now, if you cross the Potomac River, you'll be in Virginia. You'll just be leading DC. However, if you cross the Anacostia River, you have come to a separate place of DC that we call east of the Anacostia River. That is where we are. Right beyond us, maybe like less than a half a mile, the Anacostia River is over here. We'll be looking at a small portion of Anacostia today to kind of capture what times were like here when it was established in 1854 until the early 1920s. So Anacostia has long been a population and tourist center. It was once home to the Anacostia Indian tribe, also called Anacostans, is where Anacostia derived its name. Prior to the Europeans coming to this area in 1608, there was an adventurer named Henry Fleet. Henry Fleet so eloquently described the area that we're standing on this way in 1600. This place, without all question, is the most pleasant, the most healthful place in all the country, and most convenient for habitation. The air is temperate in summer and not violent in winter. The Indians, in one day, will commonly catch 30 sturgeons in a place in the river that was not above 12 fathom broad. And as for deers, buffalo, bears, turkeys, the woods do swarm with them, and the soil exceedingly fertile. But above this place, the country is rocky and mountainous like Canada. When I read that painted a picture for me. In 1600, what this place was like when Indians were here in Buffalo in Washington, D.C., Buffalo and Bear in Washington, D.C. So that paints a really good picture of what, excuse us a minute, but meanwhile, back to his description of D.C., when he said the Indians do commonly catch 30 sturgeon a day, I'm thinking, okay, it's fish, because it's in the river, right? But I had no idea what a sturgeon was. When I took the time to research what a sturgeon was, that's a fish that dates back to the prehistoric days. It's not extinct to this day, but it's extremely endangered right now. It's critically endangered is what they're listed as today. They average 7 to 12 feet in length. Monsters. They had shark fins on the end of them. They found one in Europe that was a record 24 feet in length. So these Indians on canoes, and I've been on a canoe before that tipped over on me, okay? So to catch these kind of fish without the kind of technology we have today, those big boats we have today, was pretty skillful. So I can talk all day about the Indians, believe me. I mean, there's a whole tour just for Indians. But today, we're gonna talk about the mid-19th century to late 20th century and what it was like here. Meanwhile, we're gonna take a walk up to the corner. We're gonna take a walk up to the corner, and while we're walking up, I suggest that you soak in what it would have been like in the mid-1800s to early 1900s, right? Just imagine for a minute, no telephone poles, no telephone wires, no street signs, none of these cars, not even paved roads, right? Block out the sound of cars that you hear now, the horns and the sirens, and replace those noises with just the sound of the great outdoors, of chickens clucking, of birds singing, of pigs and cows oinking and mooing. And when we get to the other end, we will have a conversation about the houses. We will have a conversation about the architecture of the homes on this street. the architectural, the architectural uh, character of Anacostia is unique in Washington. Nowhere else in the District of Columbia will you find such a collection of mid-1800 to early 1900 houses. My favorite, there's a mixture of Italianate, cottage, Washington row houses, and even some Queen Anne houses architecture styles as well. My favorite are these 6 houses here. So these 6 houses here, 3 of them are 1-bedroom family houses. How can you call it a family house when it's 1 bedroom? I'm still trying to get past that part, but that's just me. But then the other 3 are 2-bedroom family homes, right? They're known as Rose's Row. They call it that because a man by the name, actually he was a saloon keeper who had these houses built in 1890. His name was William H. Rose. They're built in the Italianate style. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Italianate architecture. Let's see, like I said, they were built in 1890, and in the 1980s, they were rehabilitated to continue to represent what life was like in Uniontown during the 1850s, or, during the mid-1800s. Uniontown was a predominantly white community. There were covenants in the deed that restricted people who were non-white to purchase here. So that helped it stay minority. That helped it stay pretty much an all-white community during that time. But in 1948, the Supreme Court passed a law that banned restrictive buying practices, racial restrictive buying practices, right? And so between 1948, when the Supreme Court passed that ban, and then in 1854, you had a Supreme Court decision called Bolin versus Sharp, and that's the DC version of Brown versus Board of Education, which desegregated the schools. So during that time between 1948 and 1954, there was an extreme change in the demographics in this neighborhood. It went from being predominantly white to predominantly black, seemingly overnight. Okay, so now let's continue our stroll through this historic district of Anacostia as we next take a look at a church called St. Teresa of Avila, which is kind of cool history too. I'm standing before St. Teresa of Avila Church, Catholic Church. This church was formed when a need arose because Uniontown began to grow rapidly. And Catholics, the only opportunities they had, the only churches they could go to was a church on the other side of the Anacostia River on the far end of Southeast called St. Peter's. When they decided to form a church, the black Catholics, the white Catholics alike, all came together to, with their resources and money, you know, with labor, they all contributed labor and money to build this church. And it was opened on May 5th in 1879. But as the church grew, so did racial tensions. The church became a predominantly white church, and the black parishioners were disturbed about how they were being treated in terms of positions and roles they played in the church when they actually helped build it as well. It got to the point where two parishioners went to the archbishop, went on a journey, and journey is the right word to use here, because they went all the way to Baltimore to see the Archbishop of Baltimore to get permission to open their own church. Now, Baltimore, going 70 miles an hour down the Parkway is 45 minutes. I can't even imagine what it was like in 1879 trying to go to Baltimore, right? Anyway, they made that journey and they were approved, and they ended up opening up a church called Our Lady of Perpetual Help in 1920, which is up the hill here. And this is out of a lot of schools, and you know, in old Anacostia, a lot of schools and churches were being built by the community like right away in the 1800s. We still have some schools and churches that still exist today, but a lot of them have moved and changed buildings. This is the original. 1879, this building has been standing here, and the church still operates as we speak, pre-COVID anyway. So next we're going to take another stroll down the end of the block, and we're going to end up on the adjacent corner where we started to go look at our next venture. Okay, so before we move on to the next site, I have one question for you guys. What does Anniston, Alabama, Bennington, Vermont, Morristown, Tennessee, and Franklin, Indiana have in common with Anacostia? Drawing a blank? Follow me. Let's take a look. I can show you better than I can tell you. Humongous chairs. Humongous chairs. All of them had humongous chairs, right? So, at 19.5 feet, over 4,000 pounds, the Anacostia big chair is this neighborhood's monument. But it wouldn't be long before the folks in Morristown, Tennessee came up with an even bigger chair at 20 feet. For whatever reason, that chair went away in 1962. But one big chair after the other, each taller than the last, will continue to happen until in Italy, they had a chair that was 65 feet tall, 6.5 stories tall. Like, I'm sure that competed with the Eiffel Tower. I mean, not the Eiffel Tower, I'm sorry. I'm sure that competed with the Leaning Tower of Pisa. And it still holds the crown as the world's tallest church today. But do people here, do they concern themselves about how tall the chair is? No, we don't. It's like I said, it's more of a monument. But even bigger than a monument, it's a guidepost. If I had a nickel every time I gave directions using the big chair as a guidepost, or been given directions, been on the other end of receiving directions, right? You know, so when you get to the big chair, you make a left and don't go past the big chair or whatever. The big chair is used that way here. So it was originally made of African mahogany wood, like real furniture. Why do we have that chair in the first place? Because it was sitting in the parking lot of a furniture store called Curtis Brothers, right? It was basically their advertising. But what happened in 2005, after years of wear and tear, it was removed for 9 months as it was duplicated to look exactly the same way. The difference is it's no longer made of wood. It's actually built to last with aluminum today. So here we're going to cross the street and go take a closer look at the chair and probably get some pictures in. What do you say? Okay, so from here, we're going to take a stroll up Anacostia's main avenue. We call that main avenue Martin Luther King Avenue. Let's take a hike, shall we? So as I mentioned earlier, Anacostia was once called Uniontown. It was called Uniontown when it was established in 1854 until it was renamed in 1886. We're standing on Martin Luther King Avenue, which is the main street. It cuts through Anacostia. It's our main street. It's at the lowest elevation of Anacostia in that it's literally at sea level. Like, straight ahead down there is the river. So we're literally at sea level. However, remember in the beginning when I talked about Henry Fleet and his description was, he said, but above this place, he said above this place, the country is rocky and mountainous, like Canada. By the way, he spelled Canada C-A-N-N-I-D-A, which is kind of cool, I thought. But to his point, it's not so much rocky anymore, but it's totally mountainous. Before me is just one of the hills that eventually will lead to an elevation of 276 above sea level. The views are great. A lot of the streets are named in relation to hills. Like this is Maple View. We have Hilltop Terrace. We have names like Valley Street. And one other, Buena Vista Drive. So a lot of the street names reflect the heights that Anacostia goes to. Anyway, along Martin Luther King Avenue now, you'll see a lot of old mixed with new, with the new quickly morphing in. There's plenty of construction up the road that will indicate that this area is still growing. Okay, again, before we part, I just want to remind you that my name is Craig. And to qualify, I have been in DC. I have been living east of the Anacostia River. It has been my love for over 50 years. I literally wasn't born here like I wanted to be, but my father was and his father was. We came here in 1898, as a matter of fact, but my father was in the Navy when I was born. So I was born in Portsmouth, Virginia. I hate to admit that, but I've been here since I was 2 years old. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the tour, and I beg you to please leave any questions that you have below, and we will get right back to you with your answer. If we have an answer. Well, if we don't have an answer, we'll find an answer. Meanwhile, there's a lot of things to explore in DC beyond the monuments and the memorials. I believe this is a place where For me, the neighborhoods and the people are DC. Thanks.